picking up on the manual swap on the E36. Last time I spoke with you, I had started removing the brake pedal assembly and shifter console. We had covered all of that in the previous video. So today we're going to pick up with installing most of the manual parts. I've already got most of it done off camera, so I'm just going to go over how I did it and what I found to be the easiest way. I was recording it, but due to it being hard to record and work on the car at the same time, I decided to just work on it, and then I would go over it once it was all installed and everything. So we are up to the point of putting the drive shaft in and supporting it with the cross members and everything. The transmission is in, the brake pedal assembly is in, the lines are ran for the brake pedal assembly to the master cylinder and the brake fluid reservoir, and all the way down to the slave cylinder for the clutch. If the transmission is in, that means that the clutch and the clutch kit and everything is in. I'm going to show you guys how I did that, how I found the easiest ways to do it was. So we're going to get started with that. Alright, as I explained to you guys about the automatic brake pedal assembly removal, you have these 4 bolts and this 5th one up top that you have to remove. But since we're putting in the manual brake pedal assembly, you have to put these 4 bolts back on, this one up top, and this connector. Now you'll have your clutch pedal over here on the left with your master cylinder on the left side, and you'll have one line going off and then an inside on the back, which I'll show you inside the car. I just want to get an outside reference of the automatic brake pedal assembly so that you can see what I'm talking about. So once again, you'll get your brake pedal assembly in there. It's easiest if you work towards the brake booster U-joint. Get that in first, which will slide right through this hole, and it will connect into that hole with a locking pin on the spring, so you'll be able to connect that. I'll show you exactly what I mean once we get inside the car. Then put your 4 bolts on, line up your top one before you tighten those down, and just once they're lined up, tighten them all down. And we're going to go inside the car now, and I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by the brake booster U-joint and tightening it. Alright, now when you're doing this, it would be best to use like a 6-inch extension and maybe a 1/4-inch drive, because you'll have more room to tighten everything up. Now up attached to the brake pedal, you'll see the brake booster connected to it, which if you lay that down, up here is the brake booster U-joint connected to the brake pedal. Don't mind the shake cam, sorry guys. Over here we now have a manual pedal, or a clutch pedal. These 4 bolts back there, as I was speaking about, tighten those down. There you go. One up top, one up top, and then, as I said, you have your master cylinder. Have your master cylinder on your clutch pedal. Now I'm gonna go under the car and I'll show you exactly how I lined the hard line in. It was a hassle to do because I already had a bent hard line. I didn't just make a custom one myself, due to this being swap parts from a car or a BMW M3 that was already all put together. So I'll show you how I fished it in through the transmission tunnel and up into this hole that was already drilled out in my automatic 97 BMW 328 IS. But once it's up there, you'll connect it to there. Your rubber line for your brake fluid reservoir will go through this hole, and it will go up to your brake fluid reservoir, which I'll show you right now. So we're going to move to under the car and to the engine bay. Alright, so now we're near the engine bay. Well, we are at the engine bay. Here is your brake fluid reservoir. If you have an automatic and you're doing a manual swap like I am, your lines will go, your one line will go to this little nipple on the back of your brake fluid reservoir right there. So far I haven't really got it clamped down very well. Just at the moment it's being held by a zip tie. I'm mocking everything up, and then I'll get it all better once it's finished. So that's where your flexible line goes to. Now we'll get under the car and I'll show you where the hard line runs to. Alright guys, bear with me now, because this is going to be a little confusing. What I did was I took my slave cylinder, which is this right here. It's not inside the transmission yet because I haven't gotten that far. Now, your slave cylinder connects to your hard line, which I went ahead and ordered a braided clutch line and connected it to the hard line, as I was saying, which is right here. Now, I mentioned that I already had a bent up hard line because it came out of M3. So how I found the easiest way to fish this line through and get it through that grommet, or that hole in the firewall up there, was literally just to stick it in there with the curve being bent towards the cabin of the car, and I literally just pressed back and forth to feel where the hole was. And whenever I couldn't feel the hole there, obviously I was in it. So I would just continue to press in, and I would get out and go up to the cabin and check and see if it was in there. If it wasn't, I would get back down here and I would try it again. I would pull it out and then try to push it back in. And honestly, on the second try of doing that, I got it in the cabin. I got up as I was checking for it, pulled it the rest of the way through. It hung down as it is right now, and I just tied it up in the cabin so that it would not fall back through. So I'll show you once again up in the cabin where it comes from and where it will lead to. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it from here, but here's your steering column. If you see where I'm pointing, that's your steering column. So your line's actually going to feed under the steering column and into that hole in the firewall. This hard line right here. So I'll get out and I'll show you. Alright guys, this line right here is the line I'm talking about. It feeds into the bottom of your master cylinder on your clutch pedal. The hole that is right there is the one that you have to fish for. It's a little hard to get to, but just have patience. If you're doing this swap, you'll get to it. If you're just watching, then you don't really need to know any of that. But now we're going to get to the next step. Now that I've showed you how the manual brake pedal assembly was put into the car, how the hard and flexible lines were ran to the brake fluid reservoir and to the slave cylinder, I'm going to show you, well, try to explain to you how I got the transmission up into the car. You're probably wondering if I did it by myself. No, I did not. I had a coworker of mine by the name of Ryan come down. He's actually part of my soon-to-be car club, and I would really like to appreciate, or I would really like to thank him for coming down here and helping me put the transmission into the vehicle, because without him I would not have been able to lift that thing up. But we're going to go ahead and get under the car, and I'm going to explain to you how I did it. Before I do that, I'm going to explain to you what clutch kit and everything we have in here. I believe stock a 97 BMW M3 just comes with a single mass flywheel. Single mass flywheel. With what I put in was a Luck clutch disc, and what I was sent was a Sach's pressure plate. For some reason the Luck pressure plate wasn't lining up to the single mass flywheel, but as was sent to me was a Luck clutch disc with the Sach's pressure plate as I put into it, and the guy said that it worked, so we're gonna see. Supposedly that his car was running with this combination of clutch disc and pressure plate. That is what is in the car. We're going to test it out once the car is all put back together, and if it doesn't work, then I'll just have to get a new clutch disc. Other than that, the actual assembly of the clutch disc, if you don't know, is here's the back of, so we're looking at the car from here, you can kind of see it in the background. You have your engine in the front, your flywheel is the first thing that makes up to, well, what I had, your engine. First thing that I had to do was, because I'm switching from automatic to manual, is I had to put a pilot bearing inside of the engine, and then once the pilot bearing was sealed, or pressed and sealed against the engine correctly into place, I had to put my single mass flywheel up against it, put my flywheel bolts in, torque them all down to the correct specifications, which I believe is 89 pounds. That's what my manual over here says. If anyone's wondering, the manual that I use is this BMW 3 Series Haynes repair manual. It's based on a complete tear down and restoration. But anyways, the torque specification that I used was 89 foot-pounds of torque on the flywheel bolts. Behind your flywheel will be your clutch disc and then your pressure plate. As you're putting it all together, you'll have this alignment tool. It will feed through your pressure plate, through your clutch disc, which your splines will line up with your clutch disc, and then this circular part on the very end will feed into your pilot bearing, and that will hold it all in place, directly aligned as you torque down your flywheel bolts, well, pressure plate bolts. Once those are torqued down, you can remove this alignment tool, which is quite hard to do. I ended up breaking part of it, but I got it out. Once that is removed, it's time to put the transmission in. I'm gonna get under the car and show you kind of how we went towards it. Really, you just gotta have someone strong enough to be able to lift it up. With the two of us, it was difficult, but we got by with it. I'm sorry that we don't have any footage of us doing it, because it would have been quite funny to watch us try to pick up a transmission and put it into the car with only about a foot of clearance, but we don't have any footage due to it being so difficult. So let's get to it. Alright guys, it's quite dark under here because my phone battery died, but I'm going to go ahead and show you how the transmission looks up in it. It's quite a bit smaller than the automatic one, but I'm just going to explain to you how we lifted it up, and then once I get done explaining that, I will get out, and the transmission bolts are exactly the same as the automatic one, so I'll just show you on the automatic transmission where the bolts go. Okay. So as we did, we used a jack and some blocks of wood to get extra clearance. We put a block of wood on the tail end of the transmission right here, and the block of wood on the front, and then put jacks under each of them. Lifted the front up, and then lifted the back up to where it was level. And as we could, we picked up on the transmission and slid it into it. Now, the spline, the input shaft on the inside of the transmission bell housing, has to line up perfectly with your clutch disc. If you don't get it to line up perfectly, then it won't go in. Now, one thing that you can do that I found out while doing this to help line up your input shaft in your clutch disc is you can reach up to where your gear shifter attaches to, and you can actually put your car or put your transmission into gear, and you can turn this piece, which it's in neutral at the moment, but you can turn where your drive shaft connects to turn your input shaft, which will give you an opportunity to find the correct spot for it to line up. Now, honestly, I did a horrible job explaining of how we got the transmission into the car, but take this with a grain of salt, because the transmission is heavy and you want to be very careful while doing this. Really, you kind of just got to send it. There's no way to tell you actually how to put it in other than reading a manual, and the manual really just says get a jack and a block of wood and support it while pulling on it. So my way of telling you is practically the same. You lift the transmission up with some jacks, and then as you can, push it towards the transmission. We're trying to line it up, and eventually it's going to pop in, and when it does pop in, you're going to feel so happy. But at the moment, I'm still torquing down the bell housing bolts, but we're going to get out from under the car and show you exactly where the bell housing bolts go. I would just like to apologize about how unorganized this video is. I actually got quite a bit of stuff done, and I should have recorded most of it, but I didn't. I'm going to start recording everything I do, but we have the automatic transmission. I'm going to run down where your transmission bell housing bolts go and where your adapter plate bolt will go. Really, I used the same bolts that came out from the automatic transmission here. Up here you'll have two E16, no, M16. Let me check and see the size real quick. The rundown of the actual sizes there is in the part 2 of my manual swap. Yeah, E16. So here's two E16s on top, and then your starter bolts are E16s as well. And then you'll have another E16 followed by an E10, another E10 down here, another E10 right there, an E16, and then your 10mm adapter plate bolt. So in summary, you'll have one bolt, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then your 10mm adapter bolt. This is exactly the same on the manual transmission that I installed, which is a ZF 5-speed. A lot of people have get rags in their BMWs, but this one is as I said, from an M3, so it's a ZF. Other than that, I gotta get to torquing down the transmission bolts, but as I said, we're not going to be doing that in this video. It's supported. I have it to where I need it. It'll stay up there. We're going to get to mocking up the headers, and we'll be back to you with that in another video. I would like to thank anyone who has been watching these videos. I know it's been, the first two videos may have been okay, but this third one's kind of off the wall because I had no way of filming this stuff that I was doing. It's already a tight spot in the floorboard of the driver's seat of this car. I didn't really have any way of filming putting the lines in, and putting the manual transmission up was a hard enough task that I couldn't really film any of it, so I tried to do my best of explaining it. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you didn't, give it a dislike. Go ahead, I understand. If you have anything to comment on, let me know about anything I can improve in. Obviously, I can improve in recording more actual hands-on turning wrenches. Other than that, please like, dislike, comment, subscribe, and have a nice day. I'll be back with part 4 of mocking up the exhaust headers here soon. Thank you.